minutes. You want to lead?
Yes, sir. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So roll call.
Commissioner Gary Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Richardson.
Here.
Commissioner Vernon.
Here.
Commissioner Kevin Anderson.
Here.
And Commissioner Jensen.
Here. Thank you. Public appearances for California state law. Matters not on the agenda raised by the public will be automatically referred to staff or placed on the next meeting's agenda. Anyone wishing to address the commission at this time will be limited to 5 minutes. This is an item that's not on the agenda. Doesn't look like anybody wants to comment. So we'll move on to review the minutes from the meeting of October 10th. Any suggestions, motions?
I'll go ahead and move that we approve them. Couldn't find anything out of order.
I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Richardson, second by Commissioner Jensen. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
And nobody's opposed, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll move on to design review. Application by Ted Redditich for Neil Goodhue for design review permit to replace the existing flat metal awning with a sloped canvas awning located at 93 South Washington Street in a C commercial zone. The assessor parcel number is 001-195-002. Paula.
Thank you, sir. So this is a design review for an awning, and as per your ordinance, exterior changes require your review of it. The property is on the historical resources inventory. Originally, the building was built back in the 1850s. It has been remodeled and changed through the years, with the latest remodel being done in the 2000s, which was a pretty substantial change to it. And according to the review for the historical record, the building has been altered to the point that it's completely lost any characteristics of its historic nature. So the aspects of the awning meeting building type is not one of the ones that has to be considered, but we do still want to consider it as part of the historic area, the character of the downtown in Sonora. And looking at that and the proposed awning's features, staff felt like it was a good match for the area and would serve the purpose where it's located there at the rear of that building. Excuse me. So we are recommending approval of it from a CEQA standpoint. This falls within one of the exemptions that is allowed by state law. So we are recommending that you approve the awning with the CEQA exemption. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I didn't see any place in my packet for a staff recommendation. Did you guys hear
No.
about that either?
I wasn't there.
Maybe it was just probably a quick paragraph you admitted or something.
Probably.
In between
Those are really
pictures.
nice to have because we can
Ride on
in
it.
my lawn.
Then we can
Yeah,
serve.
you didn't recommend
The other
anything.
side.
I didn't, I kind of deleted that somehow. Sorry, guys. Yes, I am recommending approval.
I have one question. Is that the color?
Yes. Well, that's the color that our printer,
Like,
It's gonna be green like the one on the front, is what we expect to do.
just like the one in the front
Yeah.
that's our copier's version of.
piece?
Does it stand out as far as zines, so it kind of covers the sidewalk?
Yes. Yep.
And it has an aluminum frame?
Yes. Takes about 4 to 6 weeks to get it, once you guys approve and have it installed.
We better get going then.
I like the wood facade you put up there. Looks nice.
It cleaned it up a lot.
Yeah, sure did, yeah.
We had PG&E and the electrician do some new conduit, the painter's supposed to, but weather pending. we're moving along. It's taken all summer, it seems like.
All right, well, there's no other questions of staff, I guess. You must be the applicant, sir?
Yep.
All right.
Yes, I am.
Is there anything else you want to volunteer to us, or?
What we're gonna do is be way better than what we had. Yeah.
Yeah, anything will look better than what's out there now.
Oh, it was a health hazard. Someone could have had that old roof fall on.
Yeah.
We took it down before the parade because someone had serviced the swamp cooler and it was moving quite a bit.
Oh, gosh.
It's like, don't set your ladder on that.
Even though this is design review, I'll accept any comments from the audience if anybody wants to comment on this. If not, go back to the commissioners.
Well, I will go ahead and I move that we approve it. It's sure a lot better, it's a lot safer, looks better. It helps improve downtown Sonora's looks by kind of bringing everything up, so I approve that we approve it based on the findings and what is in the app needs to be done, general, whatever. Conditions,
I'll second that.
approval, all that is needed to make it go.
And a second by,
I'll second.
all right, great. Any other discussion?
Nope.
Call for the question, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Well, thank you very much. Order it.
You did it.
Done.
You're
Will
done.
do. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, so I figured out what was wrong with the recommendation on that, guys, sorry. The
We were
graphic-
good. That
The
was-
graphic covered it, and I didn't realize it. I'm sorry. 'Cause I know I wrote it.
Public hearings. Now, we have 4. And just as a procedural thing, Rochelle, we should talk about each one individually.
Yes, definitely.
All right, and then would you like us to take action on all 4 at the same
No,
time?
take them all separate.
Okay, after each item?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
In case there's one that you want to go back and have us tweak or something, let's just take them one at a time.
all right. So, under public hearings, under item number 1, text amendment to chapter 17.52, Sonora Municipal Code / site plans. Staff.
All right, I'll take this one. We've talked in the past of one-on-one conversations, but basically, your current ordinance has a threshold of 5,000 square feet. And as you know, within the last year alone, there's been numerous projects that have come before you that were less than that threshold, that you did not have site plan approval on. And I think in some cases, there were times that there were things that we would have liked to have had oversight and review on that. Because of that threshold, you did not have that ability. So the ordinance before you is to allow for the change of that threshold from 5,000 square feet. And the things that are dealt with in the site plan review are things that pretty much any major change to a piece of property, you're going to want to have. Things like drainage reviews, your landscaping to make sure that there's the space for it. And so if you have landscape review under your landscape plan requirements, but that's something that typically you would do at the onset of a project during the site plan review. Drive aisles, parking, you have the requirements, but you didn't really have the ability to apply them in a comprehensive type of review at the beginning of a project, which gives you a better layout for projects. So that is one of the reasons we're suggesting that that threshold be changed. It's common in most jurisdictions to have site plan review on any projects that's coming through that's either multifamily, commercial, or industrial, to give you time and ability to comprehensively look at those issues on a drawing that makes sense.
So there's, on those other what other jurisdictions do, is there any mention of a minimum square footage, or are they just on a case-by-case basis?
Most of it is any change.
Okay.
Yeah. The way that the requirements are any kind of change. If you're expanding a building, you need to make sure there's room for parking and things like that. And want to make sure you're not altering the drainage patterns.
So regardless of the size of the building.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And then we typically include multifamily because then you're talking about larger buildings, additional parking requirements, bigger paving areas, drive aisles, things like that. We don't suggest them on single family because that's typically handled under a plot plan review. And for a single family, that's not as many issues being reviewed. Most of the circulation type of issues on a single family would be handled under subdivisions. And when that first process comes in. But with commercial and industrial and multifamily, those type of issues are dealt with at the building layout stage. When we're really starting to develop the engineering of the site itself. So there's a couple sections in that chapter that required the implementation to accomplish that. There were exemption language that we altered to coordinate back and forth between the sections to make sure that that would all work within the areas. The ordinance that is before you has the track changes for those. We moved the number of multifamily units down to 3 units because that's where you cross over out of a duplex, single-family duplex, which is handled within that plot plan arrangement. Once you get into 3 units or more, you're usually talking a larger project and multiple buildings on top of it. So that was the reason for that. And then the exemptions, we really went down to the coordination between the 2 sections to make sure that they still would work.
But you had to 200 feet?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, yeah. So if you're doing 200 feet, which is more in line with a very small type of addition, we felt that that was something that didn't need to redraw everything. But anything bigger than that, if you've got changes more than that, it's probably a bigger project. And then the other thing that we added into this section was undergrounding of utilities, so that particularly commercial, multifamily commercial and industrial projects, if you're building one of those from the point you're getting your service, you're going to be undergrounded.
No permit needed. No permit needed.
No, you would still need a permit. No building permit would be issued without the undergrounding.
There's nothing from the public came out of this.
Have not heard from
Zero.
anybody.
And the undergrounding doesn't apply to single-family or duplexes.
Saw that.
Yeah, we tried to keep everything out of that range because that's
Yeah, it's
typically
more of a bigger project.
Under exemptions, accessory structures, I know it's not a change, but maybe we ought to think about it, that it can't have a total of more than
120?
120 square feet. I wonder if we could bump that up to a 12 by 12, 144, just for saving of exterior building material.
Well, the problem is, once you go over 120 square feet, you trigger a building permit, so that's kind of why they
Oh, really?
tied.
Okay.
And I think accessory structures is defined as, in our code, as the
That's
120.
Yeah.
So it's all tied to the building code.
Okay.
Yeah, my antennas went up on that one because of my
Right.
shed I'm building. It's
Yeah.
like 350 square feet, you know, it's no
Yeah.
power, no plumbing, just a building. And because it was over 120 square
It's
feet, it triggered a
120
permit.
square
Yeah.
feet. So that's where you get that, it's a building permit area, so.
I was just thinking of the waste of siding that you'd have to do.
No,
in order to
that's a
get
good
that.
question.
Say if
I
you did
understand that.
But
I usually do
that's-
11 by
things
11.
4-foot increments or
Yeah.
Right.
2s.
Okay.
But that's why, because that's kind of the definition of the accessory is 120, because of the building permit requirements.
Okay. Anything else, Paula? I'll open the public hearing.
My
might have made some public comments, but I found it very confusing. So this is where we're going to go from the 5,000 down, because that all came up with the KFC thing. Now, will this go back and affect the KFC application? Or will they be on the 5,000 square foot limit?
No, it would be applied to them as well.
Okay, so we won't be going down that road, we'll have a different road. Okay, thank you.
Is there anybody else in the public that would like to comment? Not? Close the public hearing.
I don't know.
Can
Can
I-
I clarify?
Yeah.
I don't know if I muddled. Carol, your question was, will the new site plan ordinance apply to the existing application the KFC has before the city? Was that your question? No, it would not. The ordinance still has to go before city council for adoption after the planning commission, if they recommend approval tonight. And anything that's in process is under the process that they apply.
Yeah, they're grandfathered in.
Right.
So there
But
was
there was a
some-
lot of discussion about why there was no design review on that,
Or site plan review.
or
yeah.
site plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This will catch anything that's a new application, but not an existing application that we're already processing.
But they are still going to be under design review, and they're still working on their application, and we'll bring that back. That's not done yet.
So if they get one application, so if they make substantial changes, that would, I mean, there were a lot of people here that had a lot to say about that, and everybody was all riled up, so.
Yeah, it'll be coming back.
Okay.
They haven't finished addressing some of the issues that they were directed to address.
Okay. But basically what they have now, this won't apply to them.
Mhm.
Okay, all right, thanks.
And that's because their application was put in before this
Correct.
was adopted or will be adopted.
Right. And they may get back before y'all, before it gets adopted too.
Yeah, because it has to go to the council twice, and then it has a 30-day, because it's an ordinance, then 30 days after the second reading, that becomes, goes into effect. So it's, you're still looking 60 to
So
plus
typ-
days.
Yeah, and typically when you adopt an ordinance, it's not a retro thing. So it only applies to people coming in once that.
Project after this second reading in the city council and approval.
And the effective date, the 30 day, unless the council decides to adopt a moratorium at the same time, which we're not recommending, we're just saying this is an improvement that we would like to see put in place, but we can continue processing in the meantime.
The only thing that goes immediately into effect would be an urgency ordinance, and that's.
That's what I was going to say, the emergency
Yeah.
ordinance also applies.
That's the only thing that.
That's correct.
Yeah, we're not recommending that this do that. It's just, this is one of many changes to your ordinances because they're rather old and dated that we're bringing forward to you for consideration. And it's kind of a, total quality management type of process versus a emergency or a moratorium type of thing.
Okay, thank you. Bring it back to the commission. Gentlemen, any discussion?
No. I know that this is, part of it is to clean up the language of the ordinance. And under exemptions, the subheading I, I feel like there may be some nuances in there about needing the review for 2 units on a parcel of zone, but in the first sentence, it includes triplex. Maybe
Yeah, that
remove
should be
triplex
3.
and-
Sorry, it says 3 later down. That's a typo.
Okay.
Good catch.
Way to go, Kevin.
Yeah.
Nice
Good.
job.
And that was my only concern with that.
Anything else, gentlemen?
No, to me, I'm going to go ahead and approve it because I think it makes sense. I mean, it just makes things better. It gives us a better opportunity to deal with people under 5,000 square feet. You don't know what's coming down the pike with something 4,000 square feet, so I'm going to move that we accept it. And I guess we will use the coding here of which the city is accepting it.
Do you move to approve this, John, with the change that Kevin made on?
Yeah, we want to include that.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Richardson, second by Commissioner Anderson, Gary Anderson. To approve this with the change noted. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Thank you. Second item, text amendment to Chapter 17.59 Sonora Municipal Code for home occupations.
So this one's going to fall to me, but you're going to see more and more of these come through. We're trying to do some cleanup on the ordinances, or the zoning ordinance, and we have a lot of stuff that gets pushed to the side, so we're trying to grab stuff and get some stuff cleaned up, and especially as things come up, we keep notes of corrections that need to be made, and one of those sections is the home occupations. So I wanted to go through the changes, and I think the easiest way to do that is to just drop back to the actually draft ordinance, 43. One of the biggest problems that people run into is if they are in a commercially zoned area, the way it reads now, they can't qualify for a home occupation. So if you have an existing home and you want to put an office in it, under that ordinance, you can't, under the existing code, you can't do that because you're not in a residentially zoned property. So what we did is we, by making this change, we changed that, and now if they just have to be in a residential structure, whether it's in the commercial zone or industrial zone or it's in the residential zone, it doesn't matter. If it's a residential structure, they can qualify for a home occupation as long as they meet the requirements of the chapter. So that cleaned that up for people to make it a little easier. We also did some cleanup. It's kind of confusing, and I'll be real honest, when staff is confused, when we're trying to implement something in the zoning ordinance, then the general public definitely doesn't understand it, because, so when we clean these up, we need to clean these up to make them a little bit easier for people to understand what's in the code, so it's not so confusing for people. So the other cleanup that's in here really is kind of doing that. It's making it real clear that the people that if you're going to do it, you have to live there, and you can't have employees, you can't dispatch employees from the premises, so they can't have people coming and going. The idea is they're in a residential area, and it should not affect the residential character of the property or the neighborhood that they are in. And so, like I said, we did a lot of cleanup. There's no advertising. You can't have signs, and we just kind of cleaned that up to make it just a little simpler. The other thing that comes up is sometimes we'll have people that want to do massage therapy or piano lessons, and the whole idea of this current text, which is I'm trying to find it here on the
INJ.
Yeah, which one is the one?
INJ.
Okay. No generation of additional pedestrian or vehicle traffic or parking beyond the normal to the zone. That's kind of confusing for people the way it reads now. So what we did is we looked at the normal trip generations from a residential structure, and we limited it to 6 vehicle trips per day. So that's 3 visits. They can have 3 customers come to the home during the day, and that's it. And we pulled that from some other cities that we looked at when we were working on cleaning this up. I looked at about 10 other cities' home occupation requirements, and to put some of this stuff together. We also looked at, big trucks coming into the neighborhood, so we made it really clear as far as the size of vehicles that it can generate, as well as signage on the vehicles. So we have some issues that have come up in the past with people actually just doing it so that they could park their vehicles with big signs on it out in the driveways. So that's come up before, so that kind of cleans that up. And then it ties the parking, how many spaces you can use for the home occupation. Again, the idea is it's not supposed to generate a lot of nuisance for the neighborhood. Also, and then no outdoor storage or any hazardous materials, and that we just cleaned that up. And in the filing, we cleaned up on that, we took out, we actually raised the fee to $50 because there was a lot of time involved with processing these, and the $25 doesn't cover staff time involved with that. And then we also took out posting of the property. They never, when Ed was doing community development, and they just never posted the property, and it's just seems extremely unnecessary to have to post that somebody's going to do a home occupation, because the idea is it's supposed to just blend in with the neighborhood, and to have to post the property seems a little excessive, so we are recommending that you take that out, that we take that out. So that's kind of
defeats the purpose of all.
Yeah, you know, because they're not supposed to sign it, they're not supposed to have, you know, it's just supposed to blend in with their home, but yet they have to post the property, so. And really, they never, I don't think they ever posted the property as it went through some of these processes, so we're recommending that we eliminate that process. Unless you have any other questions, that's kind of just, it's really a cleanup and to address some of the issues that have come up over the last 5 years that has been gone, things that we've seen that we just need to clean up.
What about pre-existing situations that currently exist?
They're
here?
fine, they're under the current home occupation requirements, so they'll be fine, but any new ones that come in.
Even though they're in violation of this new,
Yeah, they can keep going with their home occupation,
okay.
but any new ones will come into that.
Because I'm thinking specifically of Distal's
No, he
landscape.
has,
a use permit.
he has a use permit, that is not a home occupation. He is not under a home occupation permit.
Okay.
Diesel's landscaping, he has
Oh, right.
that's a use
Diesel?
permit.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so
Even though
that's,
it's in a residential zone.
but he's an R3 and he was able to do it through a use permit, and it was processed through a
Okay,
use permit
good.
process that was approved.
Matter of fact, that came before us.
Yeah,
Yes,
it did.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did. So no, that doesn't apply to him. But yeah, so when they come in, and a lot of it's the same things that we've been telling people anyway, it just cleans up the way that it's written in here because it was pretty confusing. on
So this will
some
be
of it.
complaint driven?
No, they have to get a home occupation permit. If they're doing a business.
I mean, if they're in violation after they've gotten that.
So yeah, if they're in violation of what was in place at the time they got their home occupation, then if somebody complained, then we talk to them.
Okay.
You know, as a general rule, most of them are just an office. A lot of them are people who just need an office space out of there.
Mhm.
But they're filing a fictitious business statement, so when they do, then we go, well, you have to meet the requirements for home occupation, so.
I would question, how broad does home occupation, how far out does it go? I mean, really the definition, as I've never really seen it defined. Is it office, a place where a person can room and stay there overnight? I mean, can it go into?
It defines it in the code in here, what we're looking at right now, it says.
Don't
what-
they have to live there?
Yes.
Yes, they
Okay.
have to live there. They have to live there. And it tells in here what, what you
Okay.
can do. They can't,
They can't go beyond what's in
yeah,
this
they
area?
can't,
Even
what's in this ordinance is what they can do
Okay.
in order to have a home occupation. That's what sets the requirements for
Okay.
what a home occupation is.
Okay.
And most of the time, it's never an issue because it's somebody that works away from their home, or they work in the Bay Area and so they have a home office, or they're doing an internet business, and so they just have an office space in their home.
Well, welcome to the current way that business is done. Seriously.
Yeah,
My son-in-law, he's a plumbing wholesaler, he has an office in his home.
yeah.
And he's, it's a trend that, with all this, it's going to be with us. And
A lot of businesses started in a garage.
just makes sense. You guys covered all the bases on this.
Yeah, like I said, some of it was already stuff that was in place, but it just wasn't clear enough. I thought we needed to make it a little clearer to people what it was trying to say before. Because sometimes it does get a little wordy in there, and just try to make it just clear.
Any other questions of staff before we open the public hearing?
But the only concern I have is the 6 vehicle visits. Say if you've got a home beauty parlor, or you're running some type of transient business like that.
Then you really can't do it in a home occupation. Yeah, I mean, if you had a beautician, if you're a beautician, that really doesn't fit with a home occupation.
Because you have people coming and going.
People will
Too
come and
transient.
going all day long.
Yeah. right.
That's not what this is designed for.
3 is it, right? That's what you're saying?
3 vehicle trips,
Mhm.
or 3 visits, I'm
Three
sorry.
visits.
What about
So
foot
6.
traffic, is that a factor?
It's the same with pedestrian, it's pedestrian, it's 3 trips, either somebody walking.
Cars or
car,
people?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it probably is complaint driven because, once the neighborhood character starts to deteriorate as a result of someone's
Somebody's
abuse of
gonna get-
this, and it's gonna get back to you and it'll be a violation of permit.
And I have to say, other than the issue that came up with diesel that we all dealt with, I've never had a complaint on a home occupation since I've been here wearing this hat. So, I mean, most people, it's just not but it just needed to be cleaned up because some people couldn't qualify because they're in a commercial zone and they live in a house. And then what happens is, if we can't do it through a home occupation, they have to go through they have to do it commercially, which means ADA path of travel, and then they have to do any upgrades for your commercial, and versus we can get them in a home occupation, they can have their little office space, and they're fine. So it just puts a lot of burden on people that's unnecessary. Because if they really meet this requirement, then they should be allowed to use this code.
All right, I'll open the public hearing. Did they wish to address the commission on this? If not, I'll close the public hearing. Bring it back to the commission.
Answer my question.
Commissioners.
I do have another question. On the subheading K, it mentions 2 square feet of advertising on the vehicle. Would that be per advertisement or the entire vehicle?
Entire vehicle.
And that is specifically to address people who basically make their vehicles a billboard and then just set them on the street in front of their house as advertising, because we don't want the advertising application.
If you ever drive by the jail, there's a perfect example of that right across the street. Right from the phone, where they can see the number on the vehicle to call for assistance when they're getting booked into the jail.
I have seen that. Well, not that I need it.
I see it all the time.
So we would, as a home occupation, it's probably a smaller business that's up and coming, so some advertisement on the vehicle would be appropriate, but not full on.
No, don't rent a house so that you can park a vehicle to get business, yeah.
Unless there's any other discussion, I'm looking for a motion.
Well, I'll try to make a motion here to send this off to the city council with our vote of approval. And do I need to read all this, the chapter zoning and all that, or just
No,
with
you
your?
could just say that you're approving the attached ordinance 1113, 2017.
Yeah, that's what I was just looking at.
Yeah.
Tax amendments, chapter 17, zoning ordinances of the Sonora Municipal Code, criteria and conditions, and the appeals containing the attached ordinance. Is that good enough?
Yeah.
Perfect.
There's a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Kevin. Any other discussion? Motion by Commissioner Jensen, second by Commissioner Kevin Anderson to send this on. All those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Great. Unanimous. That's 2 down. Next one.
Okay, next one to go. The next one is another cleanup.
What's the number are we doing now?
We are on,
You want me to give my little speech here first?
oh, I'm
first
sorry,
of all?
I just jumped right in.
Yeah,
That really
you
helps
did.
when you do
Yeah,
this.
I don't mind getting hijacked, but
Sorry about that.
we'll do this just like the way we should. Text amendment to chapter 17.58 Sonora Municipal Code addressing non-conforming uses and structures, and to add into chapter 17.62 of the Sonora Municipal Code, use permit and variance procedure. Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna go, again, I just think sometimes it's easier for you guys to kind of look at the strike-throughs. So let's see if we can go back to the draft ordinance, which is 844. So we did some cleanup, and I'm gonna be real honest again, when we read something and we read it and we read it and we don't understand it, between Paula and I, exactly what it's saying, then we just think it's time to kind of clean it
It
up.
happens to you guys too?
It does. And, and we're trying to implement this thing, and sometimes, so that first chapter, applicability, it just didn't read well, in our opinion. So we changed it to purpose, and then we just said the purpose of this chapter is to declare uses and structures legally existing on the effective date of this chapter as non-conforming uses and structures, and to encourage those that are non-conforming to be brought into conformity within a reasonable period of time. It just kind of cleaned up this whole existing building permit, which was valid. It just read really bad, so we thought that cleaned that up. And then we added under 17.58030, we added the word restoring, because it's restoring the use as well as reconstructing the structure that's listed as an exception. So we needed to add that in to clarify that, to make it clear for people. And then we added a section, and this really applies, this is something that staff feels is really needed, because we have some historic homes within our commercially zoned property areas. And once they cease that use for a year, they can't go back with residential. So yeah, the radiator doctor that now I think has converted over, so they would fall under this. We haven't contacted them yet, but it obviously looks like somebody's living there instead of the attorney's office that we were told was going to go in there. You have the other one, State Farm across the street. If they ever wanted to put that back into a house, they can't, because they've converted it to commercial use. So they can't go back and have a house there any longer. The McGowan house can't be a house any longer. It has to go for commercial use. Now they can do upstairs residential, what's allowed within that commercial zone, but the whole house couldn't be residential. So what this allows them to do, and it's still a process for them, so that way we can address incompatible uses next to each other, but it allows, if it was originally constructed as a residential home, with a use permit, they can restore that use if it's been abandoned. So they can go back to the McGowan house. She can come in, if this is approved, Heidi's all watching this. Once this goes all the way through, with a use permit, they can come in and request the use of the property to be residential. That use permit, once a use permit's filed on the property, it's valid for perpetuity. I mean, they can continue that residential use.
What did you mean by abandon? They abandon the existing businesses there.
Right.
They can come back after a certain amount of time.
So businesses aren't a big deal usually, unless it's a total change of use. It's that residential, because in a commercial zone, you can't have single-family residential. That's not a use allowed by right. So once it ceases to be single-family residential, then they can't go back after a year and put
But this
single-family.
lets it go back.
This lets it go back as long as they get a use permit.
After they abandon the building?
After,
For how
yeah,
long?
they can go to use.
Not necessarily abandon the building, we're talking about the use.
That's right.
So
Okay.
they, say somebody has it as a residential and they sell it or convert it to commercial, at that point, under your current ordinance, they could not go back and make it residential. It has to maintain the commercial.
So like
uses
State
only.
Farm,
Exactly.
if
Radiated.
they wanted to
doctor.
make it back into a house,
That right now they could not.
but this makes it
But
possible.
this would be able, through the use permit procedure, to do
How
that.
long does it take to do that after she has to abandon the business, is what you're saying? or-
No, they could start it, the process at any time. So let's use the State Farm, and I don't even know, they're not actually asking us to do this. We're just using their business
No,
as
we're
an
just
example. I just
using-
want to make that clear to everybody in the public. Say somebody had a commercial in that residential structure, they could start the use permit at any time. So if they decided, hey, we'd like to do that, or if they decide to sell the building and the buyer wants to use it as a residential, they could make it contingent on the sale and start the use permit process.
It seems like a good thing.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, because the other thing too, it will help with some of the conversion and maybe some of the historic homes.
Yeah.
Because and some of them don't lend themselves well to commercial because
Right.
where are you gonna park the cars? And So it does make it, it is a little bit more of a, maybe a friendly approach, but it also allows, so they come in for a use permit, and let's say we've got a commercial use that wouldn't work real well if there was a resident right now next to it, or there was a problem. It gives you guys that, it makes it public, it lets everybody know they're gonna go back to residential, and then they can stay residential. And so that should really, we just see it as a positive. It gives you're still kind of urging the commercial, but yet it allows them to go back and have that through a use permit process.
Well, this adds a lot of flexibility to
Yeah.
the
Could they
existence.
then go back to commercial?
They can go back to
So
the.
it's flexibility
yeah. They can
complete.
come in, and you'll see that we have a process now for people to actually get rid of a use permit on their property without having to go back to you. We added that in there as well.
Very good idea.
So they can come in and abandon, request to have that removed, and then they can go back to any use that's allowed as a right. So if we keep going, you'll see that under section 2, for 1762, which is more on procedures, you'll see that we made some cleanup. We also took off again posting said property. Instead, it's just notification within 300 feet. And we just do our mail notification for any of for the use permit process and also variances. And then the other thing that we cleaned up is there used to be a 45-day window after the filing of an application to hold the hearing. The problem with that, if there's any kind of CEQA review that's going to take longer, the 45-day window is not possible. So we just said following state at the earliest reasonable time after complying with the zoning ordinance and state law, so that we took away the 45 days. And then we also took off the failure of the commission to make a decision on an application within 30 days of the hearing shall constitute a denial of the permit. Well, that might not necessarily, we might be continuing it to another meeting, so that we took that out in fairness to the applicants. And then we added 2 new sections, and that sets revocation and voluntary and minor modifications. There is no process right now for somebody, an applicant, to request a modification to their use permit. So we added 2 things. We added a process for them through the Planning Commission, which is in 17.62.110C, and then we added one for minor. If there's a minor change to their use permit that can be approved at the staff level, with that, if you guys are giving us the flexibility, if it's just a minor thing that's not going to be injurious to anybody in that area, or it's just a small thing, then I can approve it and it doesn't have to come back to the Planning Commission. So we added that. And then if they want to get a use permit off their property and go back to whatever use is allowed under their zoning district, have at it. I mean, why did it? We had to have a public hearing for them to remove a use permit. And that's silly. I mean, there was no reason for, it's just an added cost and time thing for an applicant.
Mm-hmm.
If they want to take a use permit off, we should be able to do it over the counter. And so those are the 2 things that we added on that section. And that again ties back to if they get a use permit for a residential use on their property, they want to go back to that. They decide that no, we're going to convert it into a commercial use, I can approve it under 17.62.111, and they don't have to go back before you guys.
So this permit in here, the expiration is 1 year?
The use permit,
Yeah.
if they haven't started the use, yes, they have to start that use within 1 year of.
What if they can't start it for some crazy reason? Can they get an extension?
Yeah,
They just have to come back to
we have to just do it. Yep, so this again, some cleanup, and one cleanup leads to another cleanup, so you'll see, we start with one idea, which is to try to allow residential use back into a commercial zone, and then it's like we needed to go back and kind of look at how we're going to address it and some cleanup items. And then we also knew that we had a problem with people not being able to modify a use permit or to remove one from their property. So we got that all cleaned up as part of that process.
Well, I'm glad I don't have to do this stuff.
First time I ever encountered the word inimical?
Yeah,
Inimical?
it's a real word too.
I never heard of it.
Where is that?
It's in the last page, page 3, under item F, the revocation or modification. It's a replacement for, I guess, a typo.
And a nickel.
And a nickel, never heard of it.
Who the hell came up with that?
Somebody back in 1967.
1967.
Wow.
Summer of Love.
And a nickel hole.
It was just spelled wrong, but it is a real word.
Meaning what?
No one knows.
Impressive.
All right.
Okay, could also be put there.
Yeah.
Any other questions of staff or move to the public hearing? If not, I'll move to the public hearing. Anybody like to address the commission?
There's no
Close the public hearing. Gentlemen. Any questions or is there a motion? Don't be afraid.
I'll go ahead and say it makes sense. I mean, how long has it been the other way around? I can't imagine the suffering it's been, it's caused by getting into something and then not being able to get out. So I think it's a heck of a very good change. So I'm going to move that we approve it based on, I don't have to read all the stuff you're doing. You know, I think it's brilliant, frankly, for people that like, that are on Main Street, that have houses in the Gowan House, and she wants to have a really nice home there, she can. So I move we approve it.
Great. Is there a second out there?
Go ahead.
I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Richardson, second by Gary Anderson. Any other discussion? If not, I'll look for a vote here. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No. Thank you. This was real good. This was a good one here, Michelle.
Thank you.
Not that they're not all good, but this was a real good.
We're trying to, like I said, do some cleanup.
All right, last item here in the public hearings to be text amendment to Chapter 17.50 Wireless Telecommunication Facilities, 17.04 Definitions, and Chapter 17.60 Sonora Municipal Code, Uses Permitted by Use Permit.
So currently, the city does not have any ordinance in place for dealing with wireless telecommunication facilities. So when we have somebody that has come in, which we do from time to time because it's kind of a hot topic, and you got to realize too, the public wants to have good service for their cellular phones and other things in the city. And I know in this building, we have like none.
We've had no internet for 2 weeks in Motherwood.
Yeah.
2 weeks?
Really?
It went off last week for 4 days, and it went
Okay.
off all this weekend.
Yeah, from Friday through.
You're running your business through that.
This one.
Yeah, that's hard.
Good stuff.
Kim Jong-un.
We had the
North
same
Korea
problem
has
here.
had it.
So, and there's a lot of state push from that industry on the legislatures to ease the control over wireless telecommunication facilities. Basically, because people don't like the use of the power, the look of the poles, the size of them, how they impact historic areas. And there is currently a new bill that's they're trying to push through right now that really are looking at automatically requiring approval of small cellular facilities on public buildings, that the jurisdiction could have no say on that, or the public facility. So if we see it over and over again, they're trying to limit the control of local government of these facilities. So I think Paul and I talked about it, and we were going to do a kind of an abbreviated thing. I went back and looked at what some of the other cities were doing, and if we don't have anything in place, it's really hard for us to implement something quickly, and it's also hard for us to maybe justify what we're implementing, because it's really kind of all over the place where we're trying to pull to regulate. So the ideal for the city is to come up with this type of ordinance that regulates, but yet also doesn't totally prohibit, so that people in our community can have facilities built and be able to improve their services that they need. So This is the ordinance that we came up with. Again, there's one thing that we try to do is, the city has a very limited budget, so we always look at what other cities are doing when we're working on these to try to not reinvent the wheel. And so that's what we did on this one as well. This is a whole new ordinance and a whole new rewrite of the section. As you can tell, we're getting rid of the former chapter 17.50, which was poles, chimneys, towers, and utility lines. This was written back in 1967, and I'm sure at that time that's probably was, the priority because, wireless stuff and all that wasn't even in existence at that time. So the first one that we're eliminating, it talks about in residential areas that they actually allowed chimneys, towers, and poles or similar structures to go up to 50 feet in height instead of our standard 35 feet, which is pretty much standard throughout the code. So you could actually put a 50-foot tower based on this within a residential zone. You couldn't do it in a commercial, but you could do it in a residential. So we eliminated that. We thought, why would you allow a 50-foot tower in a residential zone if you're not, our code clearly said everything at 35 feet. So what we did to address if there's something that needs to go over that, we added one word because we made that change a while back. And that is, if you look on page 2, it's the last page in your packet. And if you look at, you can find it here, the new I, section I, we added the word structure. So in the CCO, CG, or R3 zones, a building or structure may exceed 35 feet in height if the planning code. So they can go above 35 feet, they just have to do it through a process. And the only thing it's not allowed is an R2 or R1. The R1 and the R2 would be limited to 35 feet. But in your R3 and your more intensive zones, they can go over 35 feet, but they have to have a use permit for that. So we kind of address that way. And then we don't really regulate, where power lines and stuff from utility companies go. I mean, they might have at one time, so some of the stuff that is in here we wouldn't be processing through because it's not the city's jurisdiction. However, again, they would have that limitation on height and they'd have to get a use permit. So that is addressed through that. And then we set the purpose of the purpose of this chapter is, and then we have in here what's exempt from the requirements of each chapter, and then we go in and talk about the requirements of the approval of the wireless communication, telecommunication facilities and the process for getting the approval, and what we'll be looking at and what we'll be evaluating, what you guys would be evaluating, setbacks, height, aesthetics and visibility, lighting, if it affects a historic building, how many facilities they can have, noise, backup generators, and so it goes through and it kind of lays out for everything that they would be required to do. Talks about if they abandon it, then they have to remove it. It talks about encouraging shared use of poles, and then the revocation of it if they want to remove it. And then the last thing that we did was we went and defined it in our definitions, which is under definitions, we defined what a wireless telecommunication facilities is. So I wasn't going to read through all of these, all this for you, but if you have any questions, this one's a little bit more of a change than what you guys have seen before. We brought it for approval. If there's concerns, we can take it back and make some major changes, but if it just, some minor changes we can do tonight. But we wanted to get something started through the city that addresses wireless telecommunications, so we don't get stuck without having anything on our books.
Good start.
Yeah.
Let's get out of here.
Okay.
See you, everybody. Thank you.
Yes. Glad to have you aboard.